It has been reported that Anthony Davis and Klay Thompson are expected to be traded from the Dallas Mavericks, or at least they want to trade them or are going to try the market here. We'll see what the value is of Klay Thompson on the market because he's been pretty bad. Coming off his best game of the season, I think, with 19 points in the last one. Anthony Davis obviously has been injured basically all year. And at this point, I don't think the Mavericks can expect to get a ton in return for him. Obviously not a Luka Doncic type player. Probably not even an all-star. Maybe like a fringe all-star and some picks. Not like a younger all-star for an old Anthony Davis who's extremely injury prone. But I can see some contending teams possibly trying to add him to the roster to make a championship push this year. And then for Klay, same thing, those championship teams that are looking to add shooting. So we've already seen we're diving into the trade machine. I'm using ESPN Trade Machine versus Spot Rack because it's just more aesthetically pleasing, but I feel like they deny like all my trades and it just makes no sense. And I'll plug them into Spot Rack and they'll work. So I'm basically just going to match up these salaries here. Everyone to start with Klay, leave the banger Anthony Davis trades for after the Klay trades. So the first one, I still think that Orlando needs more shooting. They've started the season off terribly, but I think won back-to-back games. Now Banchero is injured as well. I think they could go after another shooter here, and that could be Klay. So Klay does make $16 million this year, and I think a possible trade candidate, make about the same amount of money, is Jonathan Isaac, who still has 4 years left on their deal. And I feel like Orlando is almost just like finally done with Isaac. I feel like he's been there for like 8 years now and has played like 2 or 3 half seasons. And I just get the feeling this year they're finally done with him and don't want to play him. Like he wasn't playing at all this season. If you look at his game log before the last two, and obviously Banchero got injured in this one and then was out for this one. He played 14, 16 minutes. Even with Banchero out, he still is playing in the teens of minutes. But before those games, 4, 5, 9 minutes. Essentially out of the rotation. The first 3 games of the season, 7, 6, 6. I feel like they're just done with him and want to get off that deal, that contract. And Dallas loves defensive players. That's why they went out and got Anthony Davis. They had Gafford and Lively, 2 defensive-minded big men as well. And I think they would like to add length defense in a guy like Isaac. I think could make some sense for a rebuilding team to take a shot on Isaac, even at this contract that doesn't look great, but I guess $15 million in the NBA now is not that much. But essentially trading a 4-year deal for 2 years of Klay to try to make a run at a championship in the next 2 years with another shooter. I think this could make some sense for both sides. Another team that I think needs more shooting is the Denver Nuggets. They traded for Cam Johnson and gave up Michael Porter Jr., who was one of the top 3-point shooters in the NBA. Cam Johnson, is supposed to be like a do-it-all guy, but also a knockdown shooter. To me, I kind of see him more as like a defensive like scorer, not necessarily just like a guy who's going to stand out there and knock down threes, but maybe that is kind of what he is. But I mean, the shooting for him has been terrible this year. He is shooting 21% from 3. And I mean, even with the Nets, like 39, 39, 37, there were 2 amazing years shooting with the Suns. This was only a 17-game sample size, but 45%, and the year before that, 42%. But then the year before that was 34.9%, career 39% shooter. So, I mean, he is a really good 3-point shooter, but, I never thought of him as that. So if they think they need more shooting here, something like Strother and Deron Holmes, 2 young players with a lot of potential, and throw in Zeke Naji to make the salaries match, 14 and 16. Should match up all right on the salaries here. I mean, who says no to this? Dallas gets 2 young players in Holmes and Strother that fit with the timeline of Cooper Flagg if they're just completely trying to rebuild. And then Denver gets another shooter for basically 2 young guys and a bench role player who really doesn't play. And none of these guys really play that much at all. I guess Strother probably plays the most out of these. I haven't been paying attention to Najee. I don't think he's been playing really at all. So basically 3 guys that don't play, and Denver's trying to win now, get a shooter in there. I think this makes sense on both sides as well. All right, the next one, kind of a joke, but back to Golden State Warriors. And, I can't really see a situation where Golden State would want him back, and it doesn't really seem like they need him back, but it's just kind of fun to do. So I think something like Klay, and then Golden State giving Buddy Hield back to Denver, who hasn't been playing much for them. He's been playing like low teens of minutes recently. When they're all healthy, makes sense. I don't think they would want to give up Moses Moody at this point. It's hard to make the salaries work over here with Golden State as well. But if Golden State just completely is done with Podziemski, who every year just seems to have a ton of hype, and then he goes out and averages like 11 points per game, playing 30 minutes a night, and I feel like kind of is holding this team back. Go out, get Klay Thompson, but also get a guy that I really like. I don't know how the rest of the league feels about him, but go out and get Brandon Williams. He's making $2.2 million a year. You probably would have to pay him, but I think he's better than Podziemski at this point. And then Golden State would have to throw in someone else like Trace Jackson-Davis, who just doesn't play for them anymore, to make these match up 15 and 18 million. Another guy, if not Brandon Williams, would be D'Angelo Russell, who these guys, you got to wait for December 14th, so another month, but he makes 5.6 million. Adding him in to this deal, these contracts would line up, and then Golden State would have to put in like Guy Santos in there as well. But getting D'Angelo Russell, who I think is better than Podziemski at this point, and then Klay and Hield, I think that Klay probably would play more than Hield if he goes back there. And then for Dallas, you're basically just taking a shot on Podziemski after Golden State is basically just saying like, we're giving up on Podziemski. We'd rather have a veteran in D'Lo, or take a shot on a young guy who's playing really well right now in Brandon Williams. All right, the last one. I think my favorite landing spot for Klay Thompson would be Chicago. And for Chicago, I think they're in need of more shooting. I know I've said that for basically every team, but that's kind of the teams that I was targeting here. And I don't think Dallas really wants anyone on this roster. They don't have too many young guys. Obviously, they would love Giddey, or maybe Essengay, who they took really high, or Buzelis. Obviously, those three guys, they're not going to give up just for Klay Thompson. But I could see him giving up Desumnu and Javon Carter, 2 expiring contracts. So Chicago using those expiring contracts to tempt a team like Dallas just to get more cap space for this offseason, if they're going to plan on, maybe keeping Kyrie and Anthony Davis in this situation, or one of the two, and getting up a bunch of cap space for next year in this situation to go out and sign a better free agent to add to this roster in next offseason. So I think this makes some sense on both sides as well. Chicago gets a shooter and a proven winner who's won championships to get some winning experience added to this roster, because they really don't have much of that. And then Dallas in return just gets expiring deals to get some more cap space. If Dallas is not going to a full rebuild, which I don't really think they want to do that right now. I don't think they want to give up both Kyrie and Anthony Davis. So I think probably my top favorite trade here, and I haven't even been trying these trades because even though these salaries basically match up, you hit try this trade, it says they failed, and you got to cut $157 million. I mean, maybe this is a real thing, but I feel like this is a bug on ESPN Trade Machine, because if we come over to SpotRack's Trade Machine and do the same exact trade, Ayo and Javon Carter for Klay, it says it's successful on both ends and like easily clearing it. Like we had 2.3 million space here and 6.1 million space here. So that's why I haven't been trying these trades. I guess I kind of forgot to mention that. And then also we're just going to stick with Chicago and move into the Anthony Davis trade situations. And I heard recently a quote from John Wall, who actually didn't play with Anthony Davis. I believe he was there just before Anthony Davis at Kentucky, saying that he thinks Anthony Davis wants to go home from Chicago, play for the Bulls, and they could be pretty aggressive in trying to get Anthony Davis. So I think an interesting play there, especially if Anthony Davis is pushing to get traded there, and something like Vucevic, expiring deal, like we talked about, and Zach Collins, another expiring deal. Like they have a ton of expiring deals in Chicago, so they are a team that could use these expiring deals to get a guy like Anthony Davis. These salaries match up almost 100% here. So essentially Dallas just clearing the entire $54 million salary after this next year with these expiring deals that all these guys are going to bring in and maybe that is not enough for Dallas to give up Anthony Davis, because they just traded him for Luka Doncic. So maybe if they really want to go all in, they could throw in Buzelis. I mean, maybe Essengay makes more sense. Their first overall pick, I think it was like 10th overall, and maybe a first-round pick going to Dallas as well. So you get essentially 2 first-round picks and 3 expiring deals. I don't know if Chicago would be willing to go as far as to put in Buzelis instead of Essengay. I think they really like him. Probably after Giddey, their second untouchable, maybe even more untouchable than Giddey at this point. And we just talked about Klay going to Chicago, so might as well throw Klay in there as well. And now you got to make up $70 million to go back to the Mavericks. So you could throw in Jalen Smith and another expiring deal. Javon Carter, and these salaries basically match up again, 68 and 70, and still a first-round pick in there. All right, the next team that I think is going to be in the market for a big superstar like Anthony Davis is going to be Detroit. And I think he fits in pretty nicely with Detroit. Imagine him and Jalen Duren in the starting front court. It's going to be pretty nasty on the rebounds and defensively. So we got Anthony Davis going to Detroit, and they're going to give up a Tobias Harris, $26 million expiring, and then they're going to give up Isaiah Stewart. You know, Pistons fans probably don't want to see Stewart go, but if you're bringing in Anthony Davis, I feel like they would come to face the facts there. And then Jaden Ivey, a nice young player who they basically haven't had for most of last year and all of this year so far, and they're playing extremely good without him. There is some worry a little bit that Jaden Ivey comes back this season and tries to do too much and kind of throws up their team chemistry, and maybe Dallas is like, hey, we want to take a shot on a guy like Ivy, a nice young player who was, I want to say, a top 4 pick in the draft just like 2 or 3 years ago. I might have to check myself on that. Okay, so he was 5th 3 years ago. So it was off by 1. I think I said 4th. Maybe I said 4th or 5th. This probably wouldn't be enough to entice Dallas to give up Anthony Davis, but I don't know how many picks Detroit has. They could throw in a first or maybe even 2 firsts in this deal. And scrolling down to look at Detroit, they actually have some young guys who've been playing well, like Dennis Jenkins. Maybe Dallas has fallen in love with what he's been doing lately. He had a game, I think, with 20 points, 12 assists the other night. Bobby Klintman, still a young guy. Maybe even give up Ron Holland. Dare I say give up Oscar Thompson? I don't know if they'd be willing to throw him in a deal too, but it would be pretty easy to make Ron Holland work. Still at 60 and then 54, so Dallas could throw in Jaden Hardy here, and then the money perfectly works as well. Okay, the next team that's intriguing to me, I think Minnesota needs another star, and this would make a nasty trio of Anthony Edwards with Julius Randle and Anthony Davis, and I think they could pull it off, just Anthony Davis for Rudy Gobert. And I really want Minnesota to make a move here to build a really good contending team around Anthony Edwards, because they've been so close, but they're just missing, that one extra piece every year. But they don't have a ton to give up. You'd probably be looking at Dillingham and DiVincenzo. Maybe Dallas is high on those 2 guys. At this point, DiVincenzo is getting a little older. I want to say 28 he is, but still not super old. And then Rob Dillingham, I want to say was a top 10 pick. If not, I think he was a lottery pick. But Minnesota gave up a ton to get Dillingham. And then obviously they'd throw in a first round pick or 2 in the deal as well. All right, we had Klay Thompson going back to the Warriors, so now we got to get Anthony Davis going back to the Lakers. What would be an insane trade if they were able to keep Luka and LeBron and get Anthony Davis back? So I think in this deal they would have to give up Austin Reeves. I don't think Dallas wants to get absolutely slaughtered by their fan base again after firing Nico Harrison, and then they're just going to go up and give away Anthony Davis. But if they bring back Austin Reeves, they may not get completely slaughtered here. And Reeves, fits the timeline better a little bit with Cooper Flagg. And then the Lakers have a good amount of expiring deals too. They could throw in Rui, Gabe Vincent, and Maxi Kleber. And, it would match up almost 100%, $54 million going each way. And basically Dallas is getting Austin Reeves and 3 expiring deals back in the trade. And then the Lakers will probably have to throw in a first-round pick as well to Dallas, which should have been included in the original Luka for Anthony Davis trade anyways. But that would be an absolute insane trade. Anthony Davis back to the Lakers, and Luka is able to stay there with LeBron too. And then, a lot of these deals, you could just package Klay and Anthony Davis together. It shouldn't be that hard. And a team like the Lakers always after more shooting, then you could just throw in Jared Vanderbilt, and these basically match up 66 and 70. And then you can maybe throw Dalton Connect in there as well, another young guy that Dallas may be interested in. So those match up exactly at 70. So let me know what you guys think. If there's teams out there that I didn't mention that you think would be better fits or that could be targeting Anthony Davis or Klay Thompson, let me know, and check out another video on the channel right here.